since my diagnosis in 2018, I've kind of made it like my life's work basically to raise awareness for Alzheimer's Research UK, who are the leading charity in the UK and pretty much around the world in finding a cure for dementia. Be realistic, think of the long game, because ultimately, we're running an ultramarathon a day for a month basically, so it's no mean feat. When I say to people that when I got my result, it was a relief because it actually lifted a big weight off my shoulders in terms of I actually knew where I stood and what my future holds. My name's Jordan Adams. I'm 28 years of age. I'm from the West Midlands, a small town called Redditch in the West Midlands. And I kind of started my running journey some years ago on the back of kind of a devastation with dementia that's inherited in my family. So it kind of dates back to 2010 when my mum was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia at the age of 47. At the time, I was only 15 years of age. My brother was only 9, and my sister was 17. And my dad had to put us into the front room of our family home and basically tell us that Mum had 6 to 10 years to live with a rare type of frontotemporal dementia. And over the next 6 years that followed, we had to kind of all get together and care for her and show as much love as possible. She obviously slowly deteriorated over that period until eventually she lost her life in 2016. So I was 20 years of age at the time, and then from there we learned, me and my siblings, that we had a 50% chance of inheriting the gene which causes the rare type of frontotemporal dementia, which obviously took my mum's life. It took my mum's sister's life, so my auntie, and also my nan and various of my mum's cousins. So it's been something that's completely devastated our family. And basically off the back of losing my mum, I started to kind of get involved with running like smaller events. I ran a couple of half marathons for Dementia UK. And I was always keen on keeping fit anyway. I've always been somebody who's been into sport and love football. Still play regularly now, quite a decent level of non-league football. And yeah, so I've always been active, but then my running journey just kind of started off the fact that my mum was ill, and I kind of wanted to raise awareness and funds to help towards charities that were linked to dementia, really. And then later on, once obviously we found out that there was a chance that we all had 50% chance that we could inherit the gene and that we could live with the same dementia. And we went through a genetic testing process. My sister first in 2018, the early part of 2018, found out that she had the all clear, and that she has the same chance as anyone else of inheriting a case of dementia or Alzheimer's, but it categorically means that she won't get the rare type inherited from my mum. And I then followed suit and got the same genetic test in September in 2018. I was given my result that I am a carrier of the genetic fault, which means that I'm likely to inherit symptoms of frontotemporal dementia in my early 40s, and obviously lose my life at some point after that. And my brother also sadly got the same result in February of last year, so it's just coming to 12 months since his diagnosis. So since my diagnosis in 2018, I've kind of made it my life's work basically to raise awareness for Alzheimer's Research UK, who are the leading charity in the UK and pretty much around the world in finding a cure for dementia, all based through research, researching into finding more about the brain and how it works and how different types of dementia affect different parts of the brain, and hopefully through raising funds that go towards this vital research, we can find a cure or a prevention of symptoms, hopefully within our lifetime. But if it's not to be in our lifetime, we're realists, then hopefully for the next generation. So since my diagnosis in 2018, I've ran a virtual marathon around the hometown during COVID. I've ran London twice, the second time being part of a 7 marathons in 7 days challenge, where I raised in excess of £18,000. And then this year, I've kind of, since my brother's diagnosis, obviously just come to 12 months ago, decided to go like even bigger. So we've now planned a challenge starting on the 1st of September this year, where we're going to run the entire length of the UK to kind of represent the widespread prevalence of dementia in the UK. As ultimately this is going to devastate 1 in 2 people in our lifetime, 1 in 2 families, whether it's caring for a loved one with dementia. or living with it yourself. And it's something that we feel that, you know, it's not a natural part of aging. It's a stigma that's associated with dementia, and we want to change, particularly young people,
Yeah.
people in our situation. We want to change their way of thinking and kind of educate them a little bit in terms of it's not a natural part of aging. It's caused by disease, and disease is something that we know we can cure, but the only way we cure it is through funding research. So that's all our focus is now. You know, we've got a target in our heads that some people would laugh at, but we want to raise £1 million for Alzheimer's Research UK or towards dementia research before we die. For me, that's within the next 15, 20 years, being totally realistic. So we're kind of just devoting all of our time and energy outside of our normal lives in terms of my brother's a fully qualified physiotherapist in the NHS. I'm a self-employed paint and decorator, you know, two very normal young lads with kind of not normal kind of hobbies in terms of like, we both love football, both love sport, like going for a drink with our mates down the pub, all the same sorts of things, but we're also trying to kind of push the boundaries of our minds and our bodies for a cause that's obviously so close to our hearts. So
I've I've heard you talk about it before, mate, in terms of when you found out and saying that it was almost a relief. Kind of talk about those feelings when you did, you know, you got the news that you were a carrier of this gene. What was your initial feelings? Because that's something, you know, quite difficult to deal with, surely.
sure, yeah. I mean, I think as a family, we've been through such a period of time, obviously grieving my mom's passing, and obviously those people that have ever cared for someone or seen someone live with dementia close to them, they'll understand kind of the perspective that you kind of lose that person well before that they actually pass. So the whole period of not just the trauma of caring for mum and seeing like you know the things that we had to do for in terms of from a care perspective, and then actually dealing with the grief of losing who she was, and then actually obviously her passing away was extremely difficult. And then when it gets to a point that you know it's a 50% chance that that could be something for ourselves as siblings, was kind of incredibly hard to comprehend. But my sister was always determined that she wanted to know. It was something that it was kind of her being her bonnet, that it stopped her living her life, stopped her getting on with her life, the uncertainty of not knowing. And she kind of really led the way and pushed to get a test to know. And once obviously Kennedy had this result that meant she wasn't going to have it. She wasn't going to inherit the 40 gene or the FTD that we watched take our mum away. I think that kind of gave us a little bit of hope to kind of cling on to, particularly for me, because I was completely on the other side of the coin in terms of I didn't want to know. I was still, you know, a young man. I was at 20 years of age at the time, and at 20, 21 years of age, and I just wanted to live my life. You know, I just saw my mum pass away from something that was obviously horrendous. And I wasn't ready to kind of face up to the reality of myself, maybe having that in the future. But then once I saw my sister get such a positive result, ultimately, it changed my way of thinking. And I obviously went down the process of trying to get genetically tested. But whilst I was in that process, I actually, my life became much more difficult because the uncertainty and that cloud of like unknown whether I had it or I didn't have it, it gave me sleepless nights. It had a real bad effect on my mental health to a point where it made me feel like ultimately I couldn't go on anymore. So when I say to people that when I got my result, it was a relief because it actually lifted a big weight off my shoulders in terms of I actually knew where I stood and what my future holds. And ultimately, one of the main reasons why we've all done this as siblings is because we don't want it to go any further. You know, we all want to have families in the future with our partners. And it's something that if we've got the opportunity to stop it going any further, then that's what we're going to do. So it's given us the power to make informed choices, and that's something that's extremely powerful for us, and something that we're kind of privileged as well to have the opportunity to have that. But that sense of relief was just a case of no longer having that uncertainty and being able to make informed choices for ourselves. But also now, I mean, I look back on the fact that ultimately I haven't got the result that I wanted, and neither has my brother, but I've met so many inspiring people along the way. We've had such a positive impact already in the things that we've done via Alzheimer's Research UK, and that's only going to get bigger. And don't get me wrong, I still have some really tough times with my own mental health, and it's still really challenging to deal with. Obviously, what lies ahead of me, I'm going to live a much shorter life than most people. But I also, I mean, going back to running, I mean, I had a bit of a downturn in my mental health in the past. I wouldn't say downturn in the mental health, but a couple of bad days in the last week or so where I kind of, all my energy kind of was gone. I didn't really want to get out and run, and I, in fact, just sat home feeling sorry for myself. I had a day off work because I felt like I just didn't want to get out of bed. And then I had a request on Strava from one of my mates who's recently started his running journey, and I thought, oh, I best go on there and check it, respond to it, like approve his request, and followed him back and stuff like that. Had a little look, and then I was flicking through Strava, and it came up with like the London Marathon group. There's loads of people posting in there, and there's this one story about this guy, and I believe I don't know the guy's name, but he was running in aid of his son. His son Archie had lost his life to cancer at the age of 3. And they'd set up a charity called Archie's Caravan. I believe that's his name anyway. And it just it kind of really struck deep with me that, I've got an opportunity, even if my life's going to be shorter in 15, 20 years, to make a difference and things like that. And then you see stories like that where somebody 3 years old, poor little lad like that, had his life taken away, and it kind of puts things into perspective. So literally after seeing that and reading that, I thought, right, get your running shoes on. You're going out, remember what you're trying to do. And it really inspired me to get back out there. And I see stories like that all the time. That's one of so many people who, particularly when we're coming together, and I've been lucky enough to run London twice. And some of the stories that you meet some amazing people running for so many different causes. But I think that's kind of what keeps you grounded for me in terms of when I do have lows. It's kind of remembering that there's so many people out there, who are in a worse position than me, or have had some difficult times and gone through a lot of suffering, and some of the amazing things that they're doing. It kind of, it's quite overwhelming at times to see what people are willing to put themselves through and do for a cause so close to their heart. And since doing that, the last 3 days, I said to my brother, I went out on a training with him for London, because he's kind of at the start of his running journey. He's pretty much going from like couch to London Marathon, and then this big challenge in September. So he's yeah. So he's at the moment, he's doing, like, rather than focusing on mileage, he's going out and doing like 40-minute like just time on his feet.
Yeah.
You're not really focusing on pace or anything like that. So I started a run, and whilst I was running up to meet him at his house, I just had this idea in my head that for the rest of the month, I'm going to run a half marathon every day, just for the rest of the month. I don't know why, but so for the past 3 days, I've gone out every day and run a half marathon. And whether that goes to the end of the month, I don't know. I'm going to do it for the next for 7 days at least, and just see where it goes. But I just think sometimes you just have to kind of push yourself outside the comfort zone, and kind of, when I see stories like that, it definitely hits home in terms of, you got to just keep going, and kind of remember what I've done in the past as well, what we've done in the past already, and what we're going to do in the future. So yeah,
I think that's kind of like you seeing that story and being motivated to put your trainers on after a difficult week and get out. I think that's probably how a lot of people look at your story as well, because you're being incredibly selfless, mate, in sharing your story, I think, because you could easily just be going about your day-to-day life knowing that this is going to happen, and kind of putting it to the back of your mind and just living your life day by day. But what you're doing is you're putting your and your brother's story out now, and by doing that, you're going to be helping a hell of a lot of people. And that is on a day-to-day basis. Like, your story is really going to help a lot of people. And I hope you boys both know that by sharing it, you are going to be impacting a lot of people. The brands that have picked up the story so far, the only reason that they've done that is because you are so selfless in sharing it. Gymshark doing it, the Good Morning Britain appearance as well. What was the decision really to kind of put yourselves out there and tell your story?
I think a lot of it relates back to kind of who we are as people in terms of like personality. Kean's
Yeah.
very much like we're like chalk and cheese in loads of different ways in terms of I'm always very open book, always have been, regardless whether that's, about a diagnosis or anything in my life in terms of the way I am. I'm very much the way I deal with things is to talk about them, and I'd rather be open about it and talk to people. That's just the way that it works for me. It doesn't always work for other people, and it's not something that really particularly works for Kian. Being so open, I think, makes him feel a little bit vulnerable at times.
Okay.
And with his diagnosis being so soon as well, I think it's a bit more of a process at the moment that he's going through in terms of it's something that he knows that he wants to help other people in terms of sharing his story, and that's why we're doing this big challenge, and he wants to be involved. But he's also, I think, he's kind of looking at me and kind of taking some, not like I'm bigging myself up, taking some pointers, just taking a step back and seeing the way I go about things and talk about things, and seeing how he might be able to contrast that in the way that he does things. But yeah, I think for both of us, ultimately, this dementia is something that is going to affect so many people. And I think one of the biggest things for us why we want to share our story is because we often have people say to us, "Oh, it might not happen," or they're shocked at how old we are, or how it's affecting us, and we just kind of want to get away from the stigma that it is related to people who are much older, and that it can't affect younger people. And we just want to make people aware that this is something that ultimately, then we don't want to scare people and say, "Oh, you definitely can get dementia." That's not the case. That's not what we're out here for. But it's going to affect you in some way, whether that be caring for a loved one or somebody that you know, a friend, and it's something that's very real and that we need to get on top of. It's a big cause of death in the UK and worldwide, and it's something that I think people kind of, because they associate it with later in life, they kind of just put it in a box and think, "Oh, when I get to that age, I won't really be bothered." But it affects people much younger than they realise. My mum was diagnosed at 47, and she was far from the person that she actually was. So to kind of have no sort of quality life in your late 40s to early 50s is, for me, that's way too young. And again, that's why we want to share our story and help people. And I mean, I think it's evident, not just with the brands getting on board about our story and things like that, but some of the people who have messaged us about, they feel like they've got similar stories, similar experiences, or advice on how they might be able to get genetically tested. But I mean, it's important on that note to express that rare cases like ours that are caused by inherited faulty genes make up for 1% of all cases of dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's extremely rare. Even if there's a family history of dementia or Alzheimer's in your family, it doesn't mean that you're going to get that same form of dementia or Alzheimer's. But it's good that we're kind of opening up that questioning for people, and that people are kind of posing questions to us or coming to us and being like, "Thank you so much for sharing your story. I thought I was kind of the only person going through this at such a young age," or they're caring for a loved one with it, etc. And we've been able to give advice to people about where they can go to get genetically tested, or where they can go because somebody's just been given a diagnosis and they want better options for welfare and care. And we're in a position where we've been through it, we lived through it, and don't get me wrong, it's not something that we'd wish on anybody. But ultimately, when you go through something and you've got that knowledge and the power to be able to help people, that's what we want to do. I think everybody ultimately, like I said earlier, goes through some difficult times, but you still have a choice to be able to make a positive out of it and help other people ultimately. And I think that's one thing that I take from having two great parents, fantastic parents. We had great childhood, and again, something that my mum would have wanted from us. Even though we're going through something that it's going to be really tough and we're going to lose our lives earlier, if she'd have had the opportunity to know earlier, she would have took it with both hands. And then I know for a fact she would have wanted to share her story just like us to help other people, because that's the way she was. She was a very selfless person. So again, I think that's something that I look back and I think we kind of, that's a part of our mum. That's kind of her legacy, even though she didn't have the opportunity to have a genetic test to stop it going any further, or be in a position to tell us that it might be something that would affect us. That's kind of her legacy in terms of the person that she was and the kids that she brought up. That's the message that we kind of carry on her behalf, I think. to kind of continue to help other people.
I think as well, mate, when you're, because you're going to have difficult days, aren't you? You know you're going to have difficult days, but
Definitely.
when you do have those difficult days, I think you need to always remember yourself that what you're doing is helping so many people. Like the impact of the story and the impact of you sharing your story is going to be felt so far, into the future as well. And it is honestly like, it's an unbelievable thing to be doing. I wanted to touch on that diagnosis of your mum. Did you feel like you and your family and your brother and your sister, did you feel like that made you have to mature quicker throughout your childhood? Because it's something
Most definitely. I think when I look back, obviously my mum was diagnosed when I was 15, so I think it was in my last year, I think I was in year 10, so the last couple of years at high school, which is obviously a pivotal time for a lot of young adults or, kids who are just going into adulthood. In terms of like GCSEs are made out to be the most important years of your life, which I'm not a firm believer in, by the way. Just being at that point where I felt like a lot of my friends were able to have the freedom to go out and, do things on weekends, or I don't know, have a lot more freedom to be able to kind of be kids still. Whereas ultimately, to keep a roof over our heads, my dad had to go out and work, and do certain things where we had a responsibility to kind of look after my mum. And that's something that I would never relinquish, because ultimately that was the most important thing for us, that mum was safe and that she was okay when she was living with dementia. But I look back on it, and even as it progressed, like when I got to the age of 17 and I was at college, like on Wednesday mornings, like when my mates would be going to the gym before college because we didn't start till 12 o'clock, I used to have to sit with my mum and stop her from like walking out the house or climbing through windows, because she didn't realise why her driving licence had been revoked, and she didn't really understand who I was, and why she wasn't allowed to do the things that she always was, and things like that. Basically just caring for my mum in that situation for half a day. And then I remember her actual carer would arrive about 11:15. I used to have to run from my house to the nearest bus stop, was about 2 miles away, so you used to have to run with like my college bag to get there. And that was like the start of my college day. And obviously, which was like, I don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of lads in my college class that were going through other things at home that were difficult. But and then from there, like where it progresses to, when my dad isn't around, and ultimately I felt like the oldest man in the house, and that I had to take the responsibility. It'd be like taking my mum to the toilet and cleaning her up after she'd, gone to the toilet, or she'd had an accident or whatever, and doing things as a young adult or as a child that you'd never imagine you'd have to do for a parent. So most definitely we had to grow up quickly, because for some people it may be a choice, but for us it was never a choice of, oh, I'm not going to do that for my mom, because ultimately we're not going to leave her in a situation where she's not cared for. And like I say that as I was like 17, 18 at that sort of time, so I was a young adult. My brother's 5 years younger than me, so he was just getting into his teens, and to have a developing brain at that age, I think it causes a lot of trauma, and I think that can go on to give people all sorts of challenges in their life. And that's why I'm extremely proud of Kean in terms of what he's done in terms of his academic life. He's gone to university. He's got first class degree in physiotherapy at a top university. Works with the NHS helping other people, and he set up his own private clinic, and now he's kind of, since his diagnosis, he wants to get on board with raising awareness for the charity and being involved in challenges like this, and kind of pushing himself out of his comfort zone, because like I said earlier, he's not the type to come on something like this and even talk to me, because he feels vulnerable about it. But I'm definitely proud of how far he's come. And for my sister as well, I think for her, don't get me wrong, she was at college already when I was opposite. We found out the diagnosis. She was like 17 or in sixth form or something like that. And she had to grow up quickly, but it was something that I think probably scared my sister, because she was, the only girl, and she saw like a huge reflection of mum in herself in the way that they looked and their appearance. They're so similar. I think as soon as mum got diagnosed, it was always a worry for Kennedy whether she carried it herself as well. And having to carry that worry as a young adult when there's people like, her and her friends are meant to be out, enjoying the young parts of their life, whether it be out partying or doing whatever you do at that age, traveling. And there were limitations put on us because we had to, care for mum, and that was the most important things in our life. So, yeah, I would say that I don't want to say I missed out on things in my childhood because I feel like my dad always, went above and beyond to make sure that we were given money to do things we wanted to with our friends, or, given the opportunity to play sport, he'd get me to places, or he would always make sure that we'd be about. But even going back to like, when my dad had to go to work, and mum was poorly, and as soon as I passed my driving test, I would have to take Keane to and from school or pick him up from everywhere. And it was almost like being another parent to him. And I think Kennedy played a huge role in that for myself as well. And Keane kind of played that like motherly figure at such a young age. So we definitely, mum's diagnosis made us all have to kind of grow up quicker and mature ahead of our years.
And she lives on by you sharing her story as well, and by, doing all these challenges and raising the awareness, and, hopefully to find that cure in the future. When you're, let's say, 3 days deep into running the length of the country and things get difficult, do you think of her?
Yeah, it's quite strange to mention that, actually, because there's a guy who's going to be running with us. His name's Nigel Watson, and he's done lots of different ultramarathon races. He's had his own experience with dementia. He's lost 4 parents with him and his wife, all to Alzheimer's or dementia. And he's a good family friend of ours. As I say, he recently has just beaten prostate cancer, and he's got his own reasons for kind of wanting to like push the boundaries and show people that he can do this kind of event. But he's been a massive support network for me, and I've always like took his advice in. And one thing he told me a long time ago was to take a picture of that person or something that means a lot to you. So in the dark moments, you kind of remember what you're running for. So I always take a small photo of my mum with me. I always use a running belt for my longer runs and stuff, and she's always in there. And I remember I've took it out a few times at London when it's got tough. In marathons and in the 7 and 7, it's just always there as a reminder to kind of just remember what you're running it for, or if you're going for a tough period, to kind of get that picture out and just hold it or look at it and just think, you're kind of running it for her type of things. But yeah, I'm quite good at visualization as well, so I'll look back on not even just my mum, but tough points in my life, and I'll use those also as inspiration in those tough moments to kind of get through. When I go back to talking about caring for my mum, and I think back to some of the most difficult times that we went through, and I look back at those times and think, if I got through that mentally, why can't I get through this mentally or physically? Yeah. So yeah, I kind of rely on those types of things. I can't speak for Keane because I don't know if Keane will have the same kind of ideas in his head, whether he thinks about that, but I'm sure he does. As we all do. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of my mum in some way, whether it be a memory that sparked by something that you see on a day-to-day basis, or just generally talking about things, or whatever. But yeah, she's definitely a huge part of my running journey. When I first ran my half marathon, she was still alive. She wasn't well, but I ran the first half marathon of Dementia UK in Birmingham. And obviously it was all about running it for mum. And I've quite often had stuff printed on my running t-shirts at marathons, half marathons, that says, for mum and things like that. And she's the reason that we're running it. So yeah, she's always in the forefront of our minds, most definitely, on these challenges.
Standing at the start line. Are you starting at the top or the bottom of the country, mate?
Top. John Great.
Starting at the top of the country. All downhill then.
Yeah.
Terrible joke. Terrible joke. Where are you? Yeah, exactly. Cheers, mate. Appreciate that. How are you? How do you think you're going to be feeling? Standing up there, ready to go with hundreds of miles ahead of you. Where's the head going to be at?
I think focus, but I think I've already been warned by a couple of people because they know I'm like, I get quite excited about things like this.
Okay. Yeah, don't go off too fast on this, mate.
Yeah, so like, they're like, you just need to kind of be realistic, think of the long game, because ultimately, we're running an ultramarathon a day for a month, basically. So it's no mean feat by any stretch of the imagination, and we're going to have tough periods. But I'm excited. When I set myself challenges like this, I really want to, and there's a lot of planning that's been done and still to be done. But I think by the time it comes round, I'm just going to be raring to go. So yeah, a lot of excitement. Don't get me wrong, there will be some nerves as well, because ultimately we've had a lot of local support in the way of donations, and people have been so generous in backing us, and it's something that we've set ourselves because we genuinely want to complete it. We're not just going to do it half soaked. We're going to give our all to it. We don't do things in half measures. So we're aware of, and I don't want to say that we'd be letting people down, because I don't believe that. I don't believe we'd be letting people down, but we just want to do it justice in terms of, we really believe that we can get, ultimately, I say a whole nation, but people who have been affected by dementia, particularly across the nation, behind us, because we're almost telling their own story through us, in terms of, there's a lot of people caring for a loved one with dementia or living with dementia themselves, and we're running for all those people in the forefront of our minds, and kind of everything we're doing is in an effort to stop people having to go through what we had to, and what so many other people up and down the country are having to go through. So eager, I would say, I'm eager to get my teeth into it and start. There'll be some excitement, there'll be some nerves, but once we're in it, I think it will just be like switching off and get down to business. So
yeah, man, I'm so excited for you. By the way, we'll put all those fundraising links in the description. If you're listening to this, it'll be in the podcast description. If you're watching it, it's in the YouTube description. If you can spare a few quid, please go and do that. Mate, we'll finish with this. It feels like running is almost a vehicle for you. Like, it's a vehicle to be able to share your story. And it's quite a broad question, this, but from your perspective, what has running given you?
I think running, like you say, is a vehicle, but it's a coping mechanism for me. It's something that I can go out when I feel really down, and I can just switch off from all the noise. I mean, I listen to a lot of Goggins, a lot of David Goggins, and I feel like it does kind of, a lot of the things that he says don't really go like way out of proportion for where I am in my life and the challenges that I set, but there is that inner voice. I think we all have that inner voice, and I like to be able to get out there and kind of listen to our inner voice and show myself what I'm capable of, because I think we're all capable of much more than we realise when we put our minds to it. And running, like I say, is like a therapy for me. Ultimately, me and my brother have been dealt a real crappy hand, but we've got the opportunity to help other people, and we feel that the best way to do it for ourselves as well is through running these challenges and putting our minds and bodies to the ultimate test, really. So yeah, running is about, obviously, raising loads of awareness and money for charity, but it's also about being involved in a community of people who, even though they might not have the same charitable cause, everyone's kind of fighting their own battle, and everyone's on that kind of level playing field, whether you've got a different ability, whether you run a 6-minute mile or you run a 12-minute mile, everyone still gets the same pleasures from it, I think. And being part of that community, we've been lucky enough to meet some amazing people, particularly through AR UK and the marathon teams and Sue's crew for London Marathon this year. And I just think it's amazing what running can bring you. It's much more than just going out and hitting the ones and twos with yourself. You meet so many great people along the way and hear so many great stories, like I said earlier, and hopefully that long may that continue. And yeah, that's what running is for us.